Hello everyone, hope you're well. Really enjoyed your presentations earlier on. Yeah, some excellent work. And yeah, in that vein, today's weekly roundup is going to be mainly focused on feedback, but it's the feedback from the written assessment on the vegan hockey player. Fairly inconsistent in terms of the marks awarded and the quality of the work. There were some really good bits, but interspersed with some less than good bits, and so I'm going to give you some of the reasons for that. I'm going to break it into three main sections. Firstly, layout. How does the essay flow? How have you used the structure? How have you decided to include certain things and exclude certain things to tell a nice, clear story? Really important, because even if you know your stuff, if it's all over the shop and hard to follow, it's very difficult to prove you know your stuff. Secondly, the scientific content. What references you were using, how specific you were being with those references, and dropping in bits of science that convince me that you know how the physiology affects nutritional requirements, and then how you're going to put that into action with the athlete. All right, so I'll talk about the science, and then finally, yeah, the feedback to the athlete and the quality of the applied work. I'll talk about that separately. So to start off with layout, I'd like first of all people to think about the amount of information they put in to their assessment. Be really selective with what you think is relevant and not relevant, and be ruthless with it. You might be wedded to certain concepts and certain arguments, but take a step back, maybe take a break and come back to it, see whether or not, really think whether or not all of it is necessary. Today in the verbal presentations, a lot of people were rushing when there was no need. Put less irrelevant information, provide less distraction, and actually allow more room for the high quality stuff. Almost like if you're telling an athlete to have a high carb diet, you're not just eating more, because then there's just too much, there's too many calories, there's too much energy. No, what you need to eat is this specific high quality fuel for exercise. Make sure that what you select is quality. So the flow, tell a story. An example, intermittent exercise, or hockey is an intermittent sport which combines periods of high intensity exercise with bouts of recovery. The fuel for high intensity exercise is exclusively carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the only fuel you can use for anaerobic activity. Therefore, nutritional glycogen use throughout exercise is going to be limiting. Therefore, nutritional strategies need to focus on topping up glycogen. Then we need to think about the timing, because that takes time. How we're going to put those nutrients in relation to various exercise sessions and what we're prioritizing. You've gone from the physiological demands of the sport to the fact that high intensity exercise needs carb as a fuel. You've made that link between physiology and nutrition, which is what I want to see from everyone. And then you've gone and started thinking about the practical implications of that. Lots of people talked about percentage at high intensity, the physiological characterization of hockey sessions, but they weren't linking that to the basic key tenet that that has implications for carbohydrate and glycogen restoration. All right, really make that link between the physiology and the nutrition really clear. Make sure it flows in an ordered manner. Maybe do your plan first, either print it out or write it and keep it separate. Something I was guilty of was to use my plan as the basis for my essay, then the plan gets enveloped into the essay, and then all of a sudden you've lost that structure, you've lost that guidance. So keep it sacred, keep it separate. Right, and then on the same vein, in terms of this layout, in terms of getting the message across, you need to use good scientific language to get that message across. Idioms, casual language, it doesn't work in a scientific essay. So things like, it's fair to say, that's not what science is about. Science is not about saying, in my opinion. No, it's about, this study shows this unequivocally. You can't argue with the facts, you can't argue with the numbers. All right. It's fair to say at the end of the day, decent punctuation, decent spelling. Come on, nowadays we've gone and got like spelling grammar checks, so really do get on that because it undermines the message. It makes what you're saying have less weight, it carries less weight, it's less valid. Um, right, so that's the layout done. Now, onto the scientific content. There were numerous cases of people undermining themselves. They started to talk about glycogen restoration. They started to talk about carbohydrate. They started to talk about an area of physiology that I was waiting for and I was just about to give the mark. But then there were numerous occasions where someone contradicted themselves and made me think that you don't know what you're talking about. So be selective with what you're presenting. Don't try and talk about everything. You can't be an expert on everything. And really read in detail those reviews and then go to the original papers. So many people were just citing the Rogerson review and not looking at the original papers, not being specific with what they were citing. For example, if you're talking about carbohydrate recommendations, it's all very well referencing one of the Burke reviews, but why is that relevant? What was Burke reviewing? What were they looking at? Okay, we've got an intermittent sport athlete who needs to replenish glycogen. Go to those papers. These amounts of carbohydrate per hour or per day have been shown to be necessary to maximally replete glycogen stores within however much time. All right, rather than just saying you need this, the review told me so. You're showing me that you've got an appreciation of the science that underpins it. Again, if you glycogen restoration studies showing carbohydrate required for repeated high intensity performance. Actually, what is it those studies are showing you? Please go to the originals. Okay, I think that's most of the things on the science. We've got layout, be selective, make sure you tell a story, have a flow. We have science, know your stuff, go to the original papers. Don't drop a clanger. Don't take marks away from yourself when I'm just about to give them to you because you've then gone and kind of said something opposite to what you're trying to get across. And finally, the information that goes across to the athlete, the plans, this needs to be far more specific. I did mention that illustrating what a SMART goal is not what I was after. It's not what we were after. It's not what we were after in Coventry. It's not what the assessment is designed to do. I know that you know the definition of the SMART goal, or I thought I did, until I read some of the SMART goals because they are not actually specific and measurable. So lots of people have written the word SMART and they've gone and said specific, measurable, achievable. Okay, good. We're speaking the same language. But then people have said, you know, your goal is to maintain mass and to maintain or potentially increase performance. How do you know if you've been successful? How do you know if you have failed? There needs to be a far higher level of detail and specificity. So, for example, if you're going to be putting in performance tests, which a few people put, I like that idea. You're making it relevant to the sport, relevant to performance. You need to back it up with references that say it's relevant to hockey and also with thresholds. Like, you know, how good is good? How fast is fast? Is the RAST test or a 30-meter sprint relevant to hockey? Please give me the evidence that shows that you've read that. Is it reliable? Have you read reliability data on those tests? I mean, this is a lot of information. So again, select those key points. But yeah, blood tests, another really good example. A lot of people said we're going to have a blood test here, we're going to have a blood test there, we're going to test for iron and maybe calcium. Blood tests for calcium aren't particularly good indicators of bone mineral content or calcium deficiency. If you have low bone mineral density, it doesn't necessarily show up in a calcium blood test. If you're talking about iron, what marker of iron are you talking about? Ferritin, soluble ferritin receptor, like total iron stores, and what thresholds are you using? What do you want them to see? If you're talking vitamin D, then what is optimal, what is suboptimal. Have a think, how long does it take to actually replenish or improve these blood markers? Is it worth having a blood test every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, or will it actually take longer to see any impact? It needs to be specific. It needs to be based on original papers rather than reviews. All right, so use the reviews to guide you, and then go back to the original papers. Like I say, use that time on a Friday. Actually start really reading into some of these areas, getting into the nitty-gritty, get into the mechanisms behind things. And I think what will really help you is to think about that performance backwards model. Okay, we need someone to maintain mass and maintain performance. Well, what does that look like? What we want is an athlete who can nail a 30-meter sprint in this time and also recover, and so keep doing that and put up with the day-to-day rigors of elite athlete training without breaking and getting ill or injured. So you're putting all those things into account, and working from what that successful athlete looks like with a gold medal around their neck back to what we need to do in training, to what we need to do to fuel that. Right, and then finally, in terms of the athlete plans, like I say, as well as the specificity, a bit more care. You're working with a vegan athlete, just do make sure that all the information you're giving across shows that you know what a vegan is, that you care, that you are on their side. Doing a table of proteins to show protein quality that's mainly based on meat and has 1 or 2 vegan sources, particularly if you haven't described why you're doing it. If you were doing it to compare the two and to try and show the athlete that there are some vegan sources that are better than others, or the relationship between them and me, why does a vegan athlete need to know how good their protein is compared to me? They don't care. They're not eating meat. So be selective with the information you get across. Otherwise, you're just gonna make the athlete think, have you done your reading? Why would I trust you? All right. So just to summarize, sorry it's been a long one today, but there's a lot of feedback, and if you've made it all the way through this, hopefully it will save you from having to have too much extra time for us catching up. Again, please feel free though, if you do want an extra one-to-one, if you don't think these things apply to you, then come find me, have a word. So layout, select the information you want to get across, make sure it flows logically, one bit leading to the next bit. Make sure you use good scientific language. Science, don't just read reviews, read the original papers and be specific. When you're talking about a test, what levels of the test are we talking about? Exactly what type of the test? If you're looking at iron, what type of iron? If you're looking at performance, what type of performance? And then in terms of the athlete plans, there needs to be a lot more specificity. There needs to be a lot more specificity in terms of those timelines. If you're doing an education session, what does that look like? If you're going to talk about portions with an athlete, what does that look like? What's the outcome of that? Make sure that you do have those SMART targets, but a lot of you need to rethink about what a SMART target is. And then please show a lot of care when you are putting together an athlete plan, because otherwise you won't get them on side, and that is the biggest thing you need. You need the athlete to believe, to buy in, and to care as well. So, all right, cool. What I'm going to do, or I'm going to try to do, is upload your graded papers without, to upload your papers with comments on them without the grades. Sorry, I got a bit confused. And then in this time next week, or if you send me an email saying that you've read the paper, you've read the feedback, and you want your grade, then I'll send that grade through. What I don't want to do is demoralize people by giving a number and then not reading these comments. Hopefully you've just got to spend 15 minutes listening to me giving generic feedback. Now see how it applies specifically to your bit of work. Get in contact with me, and then the grades you'll get will make a lot more sense. hopefully we can learn something from them and smash it next time. All right, nice one. Have a nice weekend. Hope I haven't traumatized you too much. Well done for making it this far. Take care.